So, Zoe, again, you did an amazing job, and it's pretty clear that your family travels in Jewish communal royalty. Because looking out, I see no fewer than somewhere between 2 and 10 early Jewish communal educators, including those who run some of our most prestigious nursery schools, including your grandmother. A couple of my children were products of as well. I see one of my current daughter's teachers out there, and summertime teachers, and all of it. Like, there's really yichus. There's amazing people here who are doing amazing work for the Jewish community, and you're part of that lineage, which is incredible and wonderful. Studies have shown that on average, it takes 66 days for a new behavior to become a habit. And thanks to 2 years of COVID living, that's more than 66 days for those who need help counting. Needless to say, many of us have formed new habits, some good, some not so good. And I'm sure if we take a minute to think about it and make a T-chart, we can come up with some in each column. Many of us have gotten used to a hyper-convenient, homebound existence. I don't know about you, but I literally push a button and things magically show up at my door less than 24 hours later. We like wearing sweatpants if we wear pants at all. And winter and the length of Michigan's winter only exacerbates this trend. Now, given this tendency towards comparative hibernation, is it any surprise that many of us, when now presented with the opportunity to emerge, given low case numbers, nicer weather and the like, often say, thanks but no thanks to invitations, whether that's to return to work, to come to synagogue, to have social engagements with friends and more. Going out and interacting with people again feels like it's going to be difficult, and it often is. But the overwhelming reaction that comes from people making the choice to re-engage with others is to say something along the lines of, I didn't feel like going, but I'm glad I did. In this week's Parsha, we find the priests instructed to go outside the camp when it's time to welcome back someone who has been suffering from tzara'at, this skin affliction. Ve'yatza hakohen el michutz lamachaneh. The priest shall go outside the camp. Now the Talmud expounds on this. Rabbi Abaye says, and the priest shall go out of the camp, and the priest shall look, and behold, if the plague of leprosy is healed in the leper, then the purification process that includes shaving and bringing birds for sacrifice commences, indicating that these laws apply to a confirmed leper whose leprosy is dependent on healing, to exclude that leper whose leprosy is not dependent solely on healing, but rather on the passage of days. Even if his symptoms are healed, he's pure only at the conclusion of the 7 days of quarantine. I'm not sure if this is Talmud or Hillel Day School's COVID policy. Tzara'at, commonly translated as leprosy, but really its own skin affliction, on a practical level is all about a super contagious disease and how our ancestors dealt with it, which included steps such as exclude people from the community until they get better, have them quarantine for a set number of days, regardless of whether or not they appear to be symptomatic, be inspected by a priest, a spiritual dermatologist, if you will, to give the all clear to rejoin society. Sound familiar? At first glance, the Parsha feels alien because it's focused on the rituals used to purify and reintegrate the person who had been suffering from tzara'at. And yet, more than ever before in our lifetimes, I think we can all relate to the deeply rooted need to find thoughtful, meaningful, and ritualized ways of bringing people who were infirm or excluded from the community, or even who have been excluding themselves from being part of the community, back into it once again. Whether we've been separated by choice or by circumstance, there's no question we've been separated. And as we know, this separation is manifested in a surge of mental health challenges: depression, anxiety, abusing drugs and alcohol, looking at others with judgment and fear as opposed to openness and love. Dr. Jasmine Dr. Jasmine Tomasev Mikkanatha, a psych professor at Westchester University, is quoted in the Times this week, teaching that when you haven't done something for a while, it's not going to be comfortable. but that it's often worth weathering that temporary discomfort in order to be part of community. Because if you don't do it, there's going to be something missing from your life. A recent article highlighting a Gallup survey shares the following, quote, "Scientists have found again and again that those with a spiritual practice or who follow religious beliefs tend to be happier than those who don't. Study after study has found that religious people tend to be less depressed and less anxious than non-believers, better able to handle the vicissitudes of life." End quote. The Hasidic commentary, Sfat Emet, focuses on the opening verses of this week's portion, where the priest goes out to the impacted person, emphasizing a tie in the language to a verse in Isaiah that reads, "Peace, peace to the far and to the near," with the far person referring to a person separated from the community. The priest goes to where the infected person is to examine them. The priest takes the first step in helping the separated person re-engage with society by actively reaching out and making an effort, not expecting the person who has been removed from the group to have to come back to the group by themselves. This reminds me of Abraham, who the Torah teaches us sat by the entrance of his tent to keep an eye out for guests who might be passing by so that he could welcome them to his home. The Torah shares that 3 days after his circumcision at age 99, no joke, he sees what appear to be 3 men passing by in the distance. And he doesn't shout across the expanse to them for them to come to him. He literally jumps up and runs to greet them. In today's world, the role of actively going out in order to welcome someone back in is not reserved for the priests. There are folks who are waiting to be reached out to and actively invited back to community. People who are craving it. People who, even if initially hesitant, after that outreach and subsequent participation are likely to say, "I didn't feel like going, but I'm glad I did." People who are ready to create some new or return to pre-pandemic habits. As the psalmist says, "Ze hayom asa Adonai nagila v'nismecha bo." This is the day that God has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And from that place of joy, of embracing the beauty of each day, celebrated as part of community, let's lace up our running shoes. Yeah? Let's actively run out to welcome back those who haven't come to be with us again just yet. To invite friends over for Shabbat dinner, to invite them to join you in shul, to have Shabbat lunch with you after, to do community service projects together, to participate in one of the myriad offerings that you possibly could in order to be actively part of community. To share a Passover Seder next weekend, perhaps, where we say, "Let all who are hungry come and eat." Let's also be sensitive and gentle, recognizing that our efforts may be met with resistance. Habits die hard, and the world is still upside down in many ways. There may be those who simply aren't ready to re-engage just yet, and that's okay. Remember, some instances of tzara'at, of leprosy, required a certain amount of time outside the camp, even if the physical manifestations had healed. But like the priests and like Abraham, it's imperative that we actively invite them and provide them with the opportunity to rejoin the community so that when they're ready, we're the ones running out to welcome them back in. Shabbat Shalom.